Retired war dog doesn't recognize his former veteran, but what happens next is spine-chilling. The scorching Afghan sun beat down mercilessly as Staff Sergeant Jack Reynolds and his military working dog, Rex, led their unit through the narrow streets of a remote village. The German shepherd's ears suddenly perked up, his body tensing. Jack had learned to trust these subtle signals they had saved lives before. "Hold," Jack whispered into his radio, raising his fist. The unit froze. Rex's low growl was barely audible, but to Jack it spoke volumes. The dog's eyes were fixed on a seemingly abandoned building ahead. Through years of working together, they had developed a silent language that transcended words. With a hand signal, Jack directed Rex forward. The German shepherd moved with calculated precision, his nose working the air. Suddenly Rex stopped, his body rigid. The signal Jack had been dreading. There were hostiles ahead, and they were armed. Before Jack could relay the warning, gunfire erupted from the building. Rex's training kicked in instantly. As the unit scrambled for cover, the German shepherd lunged forward, knocking Jack behind a concrete barrier just as bullets peppered the spot where he had stood. Their bond had once again meant the difference between life and death. Minutes later, thanks to Rex's early warning, the unit had successfully neutralized the threat without casualties. As dust settled over the village, Jack knelt beside his partner, scratching behind his ears. "Good boy, Rex," he whispered, their eyes meeting in a moment of mutual understanding. "I owe you another one." 2 years later, in a small animal shelter in Arizona, Jack stood frozen, his heart pounding. Before him, in a cage, lay the same German shepherd who had saved his life countless times. But as their eyes met, there was no spark of recognition in Rex's gaze. The dog who once knew Jack's every breath now stared at him as if he were a stranger. The emptiness in those familiar eyes cut deeper than any wound Jack had ever received in combat. The bond that had once been unbreakable now lay shattered, a casualty of circumstances neither of them had chosen. "Rex," Jack whispered, his voice breaking. "What did they do to you, boy?" The German shepherd simply turned away, retreating to the corner of his cage, leaving Jack to face the devastating reality that their extraordinary connection, forged in training, strengthened in combat, and tested in the crucible of war, had somehow been lost in the cruel tide of time and trauma. If this story of unwavering loyalty and healing touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support enables us to continue sharing these powerful stories of hope, courage, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals that remind us what truly matters in life. Jack Reynolds had never imagined himself as a military dog handler until fate intervened during his 3rd year of service. At 32, he had already distinguished himself as a capable staff sergeant, but meeting Rex changed the trajectory of his career and his life. The German shepherd arrived at their base in Texas as a promising but challenging recruit, known for his fierce independence and reluctance to bond with handlers. Their first meeting was anything but promising. Rex had already gone through 3 potential handlers, each ending in failure. The training supervisor had nearly marked him as unsuitable for service when Jack volunteered to try. Something about the dog's determined eyes reminded him of himself, a mixture of stubbornness and untapped potential. The initial weeks were grueling. Jack spent countless hours with Rex, slowly building trust through consistent commands and unwavering patience. Where others had tried to dominate, Jack chose to understand. He noticed how Rex responded to quiet confidence over loud authority, how the dog's ears would perk up at certain tones, and how he showed his intelligence through careful observation rather than immediate obedience. Their breakthrough came during a night training exercise. While other handlers were struggling with their dogs in the darkness, Jack and Rex moved in perfect synchronization. It was as if they could read each other's thoughts. The training supervisor stood amazed as they completed the complex obstacle course in record time, Rex anticipating Jack's commands before they were even given. From that moment, their reputation grew. They completed the 16-week training program with the highest scores ever recorded at the facility. Their success lay not just in their physical capabilities, but in their extraordinary connection. Rex wasn't just following orders, he was working in partnership with Jack. They developed their own silent language, a slight tilt of Jack's head, a subtle shift in Rex's posture communications that proved invaluable in the field. Over the next 4 years, they deployed together to some of the most dangerous regions in Afghanistan. Their missions ranged from patrol duty to high-stakes operations. Rex's keen senses and Jack's tactical expertise made them an invaluable asset to their unit. They uncovered hidden explosives, tracked down high-value targets, and saved countless lives. But more than their military achievements, it was their day-to-day moments that cemented their bond. Rex, waiting outside Jack's quarters each morning, their quiet walks around the base perimeter, the way Rex would rest his head on Jack's lap during quiet moments between missions. Their fellow soldiers often joked that Rex was more human than dog. He seemed to understand not just commands but emotions, offering comfort to stressed teammates and showing remarkable judgment in complex situations. During one particularly long deployment, when Jack received news of his father's passing, Rex stayed by his side for 3 days straight, refusing to leave even when other handlers tried to take him for exercise. However, their greatest strength, their deep emotional connection, would eventually be used against them. Military brass began to question whether their bond had become too strong, whether it might compromise their effectiveness in the field. They pointed to incidents where Rex had shown more concern for Jack's safety than mission parameters, ignoring commands from other handlers even in training scenarios. The signs of impending separation were there, but Jack had refused to see them. He believed their outstanding record would speak for itself. Even as whispers of psychological evaluation and reassignment began to circulate, he maintained faith in the system they had served so faithfully. Looking back, he would realize that his greatest failure wasn't in their performance but in his naivety about military bureaucracy and its cold approach to emotional bonds between handlers and their dogs. What made their story unique wasn't just their military accomplishments but the depth of understanding they had achieved. Rex wasn't just a military working dog, and Jack wasn't just a handler. They had become extensions of each other, two hearts beating as one in the face of danger and adversity. This bond, forged in training and strengthened through countless missions, would soon be tested in ways neither of them could have anticipated, leading to a separation that would leave both of them scarred in ways that went far deeper than physical wounds. The order came on a quiet Tuesday morning. Jack was summoned to headquarters, where a panel of senior officers waited with documentation already prepared. They cited an incident from their last mission where Rex had abandoned his position to protect Jack from unexpected gunfire as evidence of compromised operational judgment. Despite Jack's protests and their exemplary record, the decision had already been made. Rex was to be immediately retired and reassigned. The separation was executed with military efficiency. Within hours, Rex was seized and transported to a military veterinary facility for evaluation. Jack wasn't even allowed to say goodbye. His attempts to appeal the decision were met with bureaucratic walls and thinly veiled threats about the impact on his own career. The official report labeled Rex as emotionally compromised and unsuitable for continued service, conveniently ignoring the countless lives they had saved together. In the aftermath, Jack spiraled into a darkness he hadn't known existed. The PTSD he had kept at bay through Rex's presence emerged with full force. Nightmares plagued his sleep, and the simplest tasks became mountainous challenges. His sister Emily, watching her brother's decline, began a quiet investigation of her own, reaching out to contacts within the military community to trace Rex's whereabouts. What she discovered was heartbreaking. After his forced retirement, Rex had been shuttled between various facilities, each noting his aggressive tendencies and failure to adapt. None of them understood that what they interpreted as aggression was actually profound grief and confusion. The dog, who had once been a model of military discipline, was now labeled as problematic, his service record sealed away as if it had never existed. Through discreet channels, Emily learned that Rex had been briefly adopted by a civilian family, only to be returned when they couldn't handle his military-trained behaviors. He continued performing perimeter checks of their house, responding to phantom commands and showing signs of severe anxiety. The family's return notice described him as unmanageable and potentially dangerous, further damaging his chances for adoption. Meanwhile, Jack's own struggle intensified. He completed his service but found civilian life almost impossible to navigate. The absence of Rex left a void that nothing seemed to fill. He tried therapy, medication, and various support groups, but the connection he had lost was irreplaceable. His nights were filled with memories of Rex, their missions together, their quiet moments, the unspoken understanding they had shared. Emily watched her brother's deterioration with growing concern. She knew the military's decision had not just separated a handler from his dog, it had torn apart two beings who had become essential to each other's survival. Working with veteran advocacy groups, she began building a case about the military's handling of working dog retirements, particularly focusing on the psychological impact of forced separations on both animals and handlers. Through her research, Emily discovered a pattern of similar cases: other handlers and dogs separated under questionable circumstances, their bonds dismissed as operational liabilities. The military's approach seemed designed to treat these relationships as equipment malfunctions rather than the profound partnerships they truly were. She kept most of this information from Jack, knowing he wasn't ready to face the systematic nature of what had happened to them. The breaking point came when Emily finally located Rex at a small shelter in Arizona. The once proud military dog had been surrendered there after his latest failed placement, his military background reduced to a few cryptic notes in his file. The shelter staff, underfunded and overwhelmed, had no idea of Rex's heroic past or the true reason for his behavioral issues. What hurt Emily most was realizing that both Jack and Rex were suffering from the same wound, the violent severing of a bond that had been fundamental to their survival. She began formulating a plan, knowing that bringing them together would either heal them both or risk deepening their trauma. The military had broken them apart, but perhaps with careful planning and patience, she could help piece them back together. As she watched her brother struggle through another sleepless night, Emily made her decision. She would find a way to reunite them, regardless of the consequences. The system that had torn them apart had underestimated the power of the bond they shared, a bond that, despite everything, might still be strong enough to save them both. The small Arizona shelter stood like a forgotten outpost under the merciless desert sun. Emily Reynolds pulled her car into the gravel parking lot, her heart racing with anticipation. After months of searching, countless dead ends, and numerous false leads, she had finally traced Rex to this remote location. Walking through the shelter's worn entrance, the smell of disinfectant and wet dog fur filled her nostrils. The cacophony of barking echoed off concrete walls, but Emily's attention was drawn to the far corner, where a lone German shepherd sat in unnatural silence. Even from a distance, she recognized the military bearing in his posture, though now it was mixed with something else, a profound weariness that spoke of too many battles fought alone. "That's our special case, Sarah Martinez," the shelter manager explained as they approached. "He came in about 3 weeks ago. No aggression, but he's—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Different. We can't get him to engage with anyone. He just watches, always alert, like he's waiting for something or someone." Emily studied Rex through the chain-link fence. The proud military dog she remembered from Jack's photos was still there, but changed. Scars she didn't recognize marked his coat, and his eyes held a darkness that made her throat tight. The shelter's paperwork listed him simply as adult male German shepherd, owner surrender with no mention of his military service or the lives he had saved. "Has he shown any interest in adoption candidates?" Emily asked, maintaining her cover as a potential adopter while fighting back tears. Sarah shook her head. "We've had several families try, but he just shuts down. One of our volunteers, an ex-military guy, said he shows signs of combat training. We've been trying to contact military working dog programs, but no one's returned our calls." Emily watched as Rex performed a methodical sweep of his kennel, the same precise movement patterns she had seen him execute in videos Jack had shared of their training. Even now, abandoned and displaced, he was still performing his duties, waiting for commands that never came. "There's something else," Sarah added, lowering her voice. At night, when it's quiet, he does this thing. He sits at attention, perfectly still, like he's guarding something. And sometimes he whimpers in his sleep, not like regular dog dreams. Our vet says it looks like PTSD. Emily's hand tightened on her notebook. She thought of Jack battling his own demons back home, both of them carrying wounds from the same unjust separation. The shelter staff had been kind, but they couldn't understand what they were really seeing: a soldier, still faithful to his post, waiting for his partner to return. Over the next hour, Emily observed Rex while pretending to consider other dogs. She noticed how he tracked movement with military precision, how he responded subtly to certain commands even when they weren't directed at him. His training was still intact, but the spark, the joy she had seen in those old videos was gone. Before leaving, Emily made one last visit to Rex's kennel. As she approached, he lifted his head, and for a brief moment their eyes met. In that gaze, Emily saw everything: the pain, the loyalty, and somewhere deep inside, a glimmer of hope that hadn't quite died. Making her decision, Emily stepped into Sarah's office. "I'd like to start the adoption process," she said, "but first I need to tell you something about this dog's history." After sharing a carefully edited version of Rex's background, Emily began laying the groundwork for her plan. She couldn't simply reunite Rex and Jack. The trauma they both carried required a more delicate approach. The shelter staff, now understanding the magnitude of Rex's story, agreed to work with her. As Emily drove home that evening, her mind raced with possibilities and potential pitfalls. She had found Rex, but that was only the first step. The real challenge would be helping both him and Jack heal enough to recognize each other again. The military had broken their bond, but perhaps with time and understanding they could forge it anew. What she couldn't know then was how this reunion would not only change their lives but would eventually challenge the very system that had torn them apart. Emily's suggestion to visit the shelter came during one of Jack's darker moments. She found him sitting in his backyard, staring at Rex's old collar, a habit he'd developed in the 2 years since their separation. Her approach was careful, knowing how fragile her brother's state of mind could be. "There's a dog at the local shelter," she said softly, "a German Shepherd. The staff thinks he might be ex-military." She watched Jack's reaction carefully, not mentioning that she already knew it was Rex. Maybe it would help to meet him. Jack's initial resistance was fierce. "I'm not replacing Rex," he snapped, his voice hoarse from lack of use. But Emily persisted, gently suggesting that helping another veteran dog might honor Rex's memory. She shared carefully selected details about the dog's condition, each word chosen to resonate with Jack's own experience of loss and displacement. The drive to the shelter was silent, heavy with unspoken emotions. Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, his knuckles white with tension. Emily watched him struggle with each mile, seeing how he fought against both hope and fear: hope that he might find some connection again, fear of what that connection might cost him. When they arrived, the shelter seemed eerily quiet. Sarah, the manager, greeted them with understanding in her eyes, briefed by Emily about Jack's background. She led them through the facility, past rows of hopeful dogs, until they reached the kennel in the back. And there was Rex. The recognition hit Jack like a physical blow. He stumbled, catching himself against the wall. "Rex," he whispered, his voice breaking. The German Shepherd lifted his head, but there was no spark of recognition in those familiar eyes. Instead, Rex retreated to the corner of his kennel, his posture defensive and wary. The pain of not being recognized by his former partner was evident in every line of Jack's body. He knelt before the kennel, his hands trembling as they gripped the chain-link fence. "What happened to you, buddy?" he murmured, searching those distant eyes for any sign of their shared past. Sarah shared Rex's shelter history, the failed adoptions, the behavioral issues, the signs of trauma. With each detail, Jack's expression grew darker, recognizing patterns that mirrored his own struggles. The military training was still evident in Rex's movements, but it was now twisted by fear and confusion. Despite the heartbreaking lack of recognition, Jack made his decision immediately. "I'm taking him," he declared, his voice finding strength for the first time in months. When Sarah began explaining the adoption process and concerns about Rex's behavior, Jack cut her off gently. "He's not just any dog, he's my partner." The paperwork was processed quickly thanks to Emily's previous arrangements. As they prepared to leave, Jack approached Rex's kennel one final time. "I don't know if you remember me," he said softly, "but I never forgot you, and I'm not leaving you behind again." The drive home was tense. Rex sat in the back, alert and distant, while Jack kept glancing in the rearview mirror, his expression a mixture of hope and devastation. Emily watched them both, seeing the invisible wounds that kept them apart even as they sat mere feet from each other. At Jack's house, Rex emerged from the car with military precision, immediately beginning a perimeter check of the yard, a behavior ingrained from their service days. Jack watched, tears in his eyes, recognizing the patterns they had practiced countless times together. "He's still in there," Emily reassured him, squeezing his arm. "You both are. You just need time." As night fell, Jack set up a bed for Rex in the living room, though the dog chose to station himself near the front door instead. Jack sat on the floor nearby, maintaining a respectful distance while speaking softly about their shared past missions they'd completed, lives they'd saved, quiet moments they'd shared. Rex showed no sign of remembering, but he remained alert, his ears twitching at the familiar cadence of Jack's voice. It wasn't the reunion either of them had dreamed of, but it was a beginning. In the darkness of that first night, two broken warriors began their journey toward healing, each carrying scars that only the other could truly understand. The first week tested the limits of Jack's patience and resilience. Each morning began with the same ritual, Rex performing his methodical perimeter check while maintaining a careful distance from Jack. The German Shepherd's military training remained evident in every movement, but the trust they once shared seemed buried beneath layers of trauma and time. Nights were particularly challenging. Rex would pace restlessly, responding to phantom sounds and threats only he could perceive. Jack recognized the behavior; it mirrored his own struggles with PTSD. Sometimes he'd find Rex standing guard at windows or doors, his posture rigid, waiting for commands that never came. The sight would send Jack back to their deployment days, making his own symptoms worse. Emily visited regularly, bringing supplies and quiet support. She watched as her brother struggled to connect with the dog who had once been his closest companion. "Talk to him," she suggested one evening, seeing Jack's frustration. "Not just commands, tell him your stories. Remind him of who you both were." Following her advice, Jack began sharing their history aloud. During meals, he'd recount their training days. While Rex patrolled the yard, Jack would describe their missions together. He spoke of their achievements, their close calls, and the quiet moments between operations when they'd found peace in each other's presence. At first, Rex showed no response to these stories. He continued his ritualistic behaviors, maintaining his emotional distance, but Jack noticed subtle changes: the way Rex's ears would twitch at certain words, how his patrols would sometimes pause when Jack mentioned specific missions. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during one of Jack's worst nights. A thunderstorm triggered his PTSD, sending him into a panic attack. As he sat huddled in a corner, fighting against memories of explosions and gunfire, Rex approached him for the first time. The German Shepherd didn't make physical contact, but he positioned himself between Jack and the door, assuming the protective stance he'd taken countless times in combat. This small act of instinctive protection gave Jack hope, though it also highlighted how far they had to go. Rex still wouldn't come when called, wouldn't accept treats from Jack's hand, and maintained his defensive posture around the house. But something of their old connection had surfaced, if only for a moment. The local veteran support group became an unexpected source of insight. Other handlers shared similar stories of reconnecting with military dogs after separation. They spoke of patience, of learning to read new signals, of accepting that trauma changes both humans and animals in profound ways. Jack began implementing their suggestions. He established a routine that respected Rex's need for space while gradually introducing elements of their shared past. Their old commands were reintroduced gently, not as orders but as invitations. Jack set up a small obstacle course in the backyard, similar to their training equipment, letting Rex explore it at his own pace. The physical scars on Rex's body told their own story. During a visit to the veterinarian, they discovered evidence of mistreatment during his time away, poorly healed injuries that spoke of negligence or worse. Each revelation added to Jack's determination to help his partner heal, even as it fueled his anger at the system that had failed them both. Emily documented everything: Rex's behaviors, Jack's efforts, their small victories and setbacks. She was building a case, though she hadn't yet told Jack about her larger plan to challenge the military's policies on handler dog separations. Her focus remained on helping them rebuild their trust, one day at a time. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when Rex would retreat completely, reverting to his most defensive behaviors. Jack would find him hiding in dark corners, trembling from his own flashbacks. These setbacks tested Jack's resolve, but they also deepened his understanding of their shared trauma. "He's not the same dog," the shelter staff had warned him. Jack now understood they were right, but not in the way they'd meant. Rex wasn't broken or dangerous. He was a warrior, carrying the same invisible wounds as his handler. Their challenge wasn't to return to what they had been, but to learn who they could become together. As the weeks passed, a new pattern emerged. Though Rex still maintained his distance, he began sleeping closer to Jack's room each night. His patrols became less frantic, more measured. He started showing subtle signs of recognition: a tilted head when Jack used certain commands, a momentary softening of his vigilant stance when their eyes met. These small changes gave Jack hope, but they also reminded him of how much had been taken from them. Each tiny step forward was a victory against the system that had deemed their bond a liability, each moment of connection a quiet rebellion against those who had tried to sever their partnership permanently. What they needed now was time to heal, time to rebuild, time to rediscover the trust that had once made them inseparable. And despite the challenges, Jack was determined to give Rex all the time he needed. The moment that changed everything came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Jack had been sorting through his old military footlocker, something he usually avoided. Among the medals and documents, he found his old tactical vest, still carrying the dust of their last mission together. The familiar weight in his hands brought back a flood of memories. Without thinking, Jack slipped on the vest, its familiar weight settling on his shoulders, the sound of the Velcro catching Rex's attention. The German shepherd's head snapped up, his nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of sand, sweat, and shared battles that still clung to the fabric. For the first time since their reunion, Rex approached voluntarily. His movements were cautious but deliberate, each step bringing him closer to Jack. The dog's nose worked overtime, processing the complex layers of scent embedded in the vest. Jack remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe as Rex investigated. Then came a sound Jack hadn't heard in years, a soft whine, the same one Rex used to make when they prepared for missions. The dog's tail, usually held low and defensive, gave a tentative wag. Jack slowly knelt, maintaining eye contact, and reached for the old command whistle that hung from the vest. The first note pierced the afternoon quiet. Rex's response was immediate. His ears pricked forward, his posture shifted from defensive to attentive. Jack gave 2 short blasts, their old signal for ready position. To his amazement, Rex responded, moving into a perfect tactical stance beside him. Tears blurred Jack's vision as he worked through their old command sequence. Each whistle brought another piece of Rex back: the head tilt that meant he was focusing, the slight shift of weight that preceded movement, the subtle signs that had once made them such an effective team. Emily, who had been watching from the doorway, barely dared to move. She recorded the interaction on her phone, knowing it would be crucial evidence for their case. But more importantly, she was witnessing the first real crack in the wall that trauma had built between them. The breakthrough didn't last long. After a few minutes, Rex seemed to remember himself, retreating to his corner. But something had fundamentally changed. That night, for the first time, Rex slept at the foot of Jack's bed, maintaining his guard position but choosing to be closer than ever before. The next few days showed subtle but significant changes. Rex began responding to basic commands again, though his responses were hesitant. He started taking treats directly from Jack's hand, his movements careful but no longer fearful. During their yard exercises, he would occasionally fall into their old training patterns, muscle memory overriding his acquired wariness. Jack built on this progress carefully. He wore the vest during their training sessions, using it as a bridge between past and present. The familiar sense and texture seemed to help Rex distinguish between their military past and their civilian present, making it easier for him to respond to commands without triggering his defensive behaviors. Emily's documentation showed a clear pattern of improvement. Rex's episodes of anxiety decreased, his patrol patterns became less rigid, and his interactions with Jack grew more natural. She noted how he would now watch Jack constantly, tracking his movements not out of suspicion but with the attentive care of a guardian. The most significant change came during a thunderstorm. Instead of retreating to his defensive position, Rex sought out Jack's presence. As thunder rattled the windows, dog and handler found themselves sharing the same space, each drawing comfort from the other's proximity. It wasn't the easy companionship they'd once had, but it was a step toward something new. Their neighbors began noticing the difference too. Rex no longer barked at passing cars or reacted defensively to visitors. He maintained his vigilance, but with less anxiety, more like the professional military dog he'd once been rather than a traumatized survivor. Jack started taking Rex on short walks around the neighborhood, something that had been impossible in the early days. Though still alert for threats, Rex would occasionally glance up at Jack with a look that hinted at their old connection. These moments, brief as they were, gave Jack hope that their bond wasn't just being rebuilt, it was evolving into something stronger. The most touching moments came in the quiet evenings when Rex would bring Jack his old toys or training tools, placing them carefully at his feet. It was as if he was slowly piecing together their shared history, one memory at a time. Emily watched all of this with growing optimism. The breakthrough hadn't just reopened communication between them, it had proven that their connection had never truly been broken. The military might have separated them physically, but the bond they shared ran deeper than any official order could reach. As winter approached, bringing cooler temperatures to Arizona, Jack and Rex found a new rhythm in their shared life. The breakthrough had opened a door, but they were. The truth about Rex's lost years emerged gradually, like pieces of a dark puzzle falling into place. It began when Emily received an unmarked envelope containing veterinary records from a military transfer station. The documents painted a disturbing picture of neglect and misunderstanding that had followed Rex's forced retirement. The initial evaluation had labeled him as aggressive and unsuitable for civilian placement, a stark contrast to his exemplary service record. This single notation had followed Rex through the system, coloring every subsequent interaction. All facilities had treated him with suspicion, handling him with unnecessary force that only reinforced his defensive behaviors. Jack spent hours poring over the records, his hands shaking with barely contained rage. There were incidents of Rex being muzzled for extended periods, of being confined to small spaces when he displayed his trained behaviors. One facility had even attempted to retrain him using harsh methods that went against everything military working dogs stood for. They didn't understand him, Jack explained to Emily one evening, his voice thick with emotion. They saw a threat instead of a soldier. The records showed Rex had been transferred 6 times in 18 months, each move further damaging his trust in humans. His final placement, before the local shelter, had been with a family unequipped to handle a military-trained dog. Through careful networking with veteran communities, Emily uncovered more details. Former handlers and kennel staff came forward with stories. They spoke of Rex's confusion in those early days, how he would stand at attention for hours, waiting for commands that never came. Some had recognized his military training but were overruled by administrators focused on quick placements. The most heartbreaking revelation came from a former volunteer at one of the facilities. She described finding Rex performing night patrols in his kennel, protecting imaginary squadmates. When she tried to report his obvious PTSD symptoms, her concerns were dismissed. The facility's solution had been sedation rather than understanding. The family that had briefly adopted Rex provided their own painful chapter. Their report described a dog perpetually on edge, conducting security sweeps of their home, responding to car backfires with military precision. They hadn't known how to help him transition from warrior to pet, and their frustration had led to harsh corrections that only deepened his trauma. Jack recognized behaviors in these accounts that mirrored his own struggles. Like Rex, he had found civilian life hostile to the instincts that had kept them alive in combat. The hypervigilance, the need for constant mission readiness, the inability to shift out of warrior mode, these weren't behavioral problems but survival mechanisms. Medical records revealed physical neglect as well. Rex's combat injuries, which had required specific care, had been largely ignored. The scar on his flank, earned saving their unit from an ambush, had healed poorly due to lack of proper treatment. His joint issues, common in military working dogs, had gone unaddressed. Emily compiled all this information into a comprehensive report, building a case that went beyond just Rex's story. She found similar patterns in other military working dog separations, a systematic failure to understand and address the unique needs of these veteran animals. But the system seemed designed to treat them as equipment to be decommissioned rather than soldiers to be honored. Private veterinary assessments, arranged by Emily, revealed the full extent of Rex's physical and psychological trauma. X-rays showed stress fractures that had healed wrong, suggesting periods of harsh handling. His anxiety responses indicated prolonged periods of isolation and confinement, yet through it all, his basic training remained intact, a testament to his unbroken spirit. The revelations hit Jack hard. Each new detail added to his guilt over not being able to protect his partner. He spent increasingly more time with Rex, speaking softly about their shared experiences, acknowledging the pain they both carried. Slowly, Rex began responding to this understanding with subtle changes in his behavior. Their breakthrough moments now carried deeper meaning. Rex's response to the tactical vest hadn't just been about memory, it had been about finding safety in their shared identity as warriors. His gradual return to their old training patterns wasn't just muscle memory, but a reclaiming of his true self. As winter settled over Arizona, Jack and Emily began reaching out to other handlers who had been separated from their dogs. Stories similar to Rex's emerged, suggesting a pattern of institutional failure. Many handlers had lost track of their partners entirely, while others fought bureaucratic battles to be reunited. The evidence they gathered pointed to a larger issue: the military's failure to recognize the deep bonds formed between handlers and their dogs, and the trauma caused by breaking those bonds. Rex's story was becoming a symbol of a system that needed to change, a call to action for better treatment of four-legged veterans. Through it all, Rex continued his slow journey toward healing, each day bringing small victories. The trust rebuilding between him and Jack took on new significance. It wasn't just about their personal reconnection, but about proving that these bonds could survive even the worst treatment, given time and understanding. Their story was no longer just about two warriors finding their way back to each other. It had become evidence of a larger battle that needed to be fought, a testament to the resilience of the bonds formed in service, and a challenge to a system that had failed to honor those bonds. The story of Jack and Rex began spreading through the veteran community like wildfire. It started with Emily sharing their documentation at a local veterans support group, but quickly gained momentum as other handlers recognized parallels with their own experiences. Social media groups dedicated to military working dogs picked up their story, and soon messages of support and similar accounts flooded in. Local news caught wind of the story when a group of veterans organized a rally outside the regional military administration office. The sight of former handlers, some in wheelchairs or using canes, holding photos of their canine partners, drew significant attention. Jack was initially hesitant about the publicity, but Emily convinced him that their story needed to be told. Sarah Thompson, a respected investigative journalist, approached them about doing a feature story. Her coverage went beyond the emotional reunion, diving deep into the systemic issues facing retired military working dogs. She uncovered dozens of similar cases: handlers separated from their dogs without cause, canine veterans shuttled through the system without proper care or understanding. The veteran community mobilized with remarkable efficiency. Former handlers offered testimony about their own experiences. Military dog trainers came forward with expert opinions about the importance of maintaining handler-dog bonds. But even civilian dog behaviorists joined the cause, providing professional assessments of the psychological impact of forced separations. A retired military veterinarian, Dr. James Morrison, reviewed Rex's records and provided a damning professional opinion. His report highlighted how the military's handling of Rex's retirement had violated their own protocols for working dog care. But this documentation became a cornerstone of the growing case against the system's treatment of canine veterans. Support came from unexpected quarters. A congresswoman, whose son had served with a military working dog in Afghanistan, took interest in the case. She began asking pointed questions about the military's policies regarding handler dog separations. Her involvement elevated the issue from a local human interest story to a matter of policy concern. Local businesses joined the cause. A veterinary clinic offered free services for retired military dogs. A pet supply store started a program to provide specialized equipment for former working dogs transitioning to civilian life. A training facility opened its doors for rehabilitation sessions, understanding that these dogs needed more than basic obedience training. The movement gained further momentum when a well-known documentary filmmaker expressed interest in telling their story. Through careful filming of Jack and Rex's daily interactions, they captured both the struggles and triumphs of their journey. The footage showed Rex's gradual return to trust, the careful dance of two warriors healing together. Emily organized weekly support meetings for handlers and their dogs, creating a safe space for sharing experiences and strategies. These gatherings became a powerful testament to the healing power of community understanding. Dogs who struggled in other environments found comfort among fellow veterans, both human and canine. Military family organizations joined the advocacy efforts, recognizing that handler dog separations affected entire families. They shared stories of how these partnerships had saved lives not just on the battlefield, but in the difficult transition back to civilian life. Their testimonies highlighted the therapeutic value of maintaining these bonds. The media attention brought experts in animal behavior and PTSD treatment into the conversation. They provided scientific backing for what handlers had long known, that the bond between warrior and working dog was unique and vital to both parties' well-being. Their research helped frame the issue as not just an emotional concern but a matter of medical necessity. Social media played a crucial role in spreading awareness. Videos of Rex's progress, shared with permission, went viral. The sight of the German Shepherd gradually reclaiming his identity as a working dog, while healing alongside his handler, resonated with millions. Each share and comment added pressure for systematic change. Various advocacy groups began coordinating their efforts, forming a coalition dedicated to reforming military working dog retirement policies. They collected statistics, gathered testimonies, and built a comprehensive case for maintaining handler-dog partnerships whenever possible. Their work began drawing attention from military policymakers. Through it all, Jack and Rex became somewhat reluctant symbols of the cause. Their story exemplified both the system's failures and the possibility of healing. Each small victory in their personal journey, Rex responding to old commands, sharing quiet moments of trust, working together in their yard, became fuel for the larger movement. The groundswell of support created a protective circle around them, allowing Jack and Rex to focus on their recovery, while others fought the larger battles. But the community's involvement transformed their private struggle into a catalyst for change, proving that sometimes the most personal stories have the power to spark widespread reform. As winter turned to spring, what had begun as one handler's quest to reconnect with his dog had grown into a movement challenging long-standing policies and assumptions. The community's involvement had not only supported Jack and Rex's healing but had begun creating paths for other handlers and dogs to find their way back to each other. The Military Review Board hearing was scheduled for a crisp morning in March. The grand meeting hall of the Regional Military Administration building buzzed with tension as Jack, wearing his formal uniform for the first time in years, sat beside Emily and their legal team. Rex lay at his feet, more composed than he'd been in months, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The panel consisted of 5 senior officers, their faces impassive as they reviewed the extensive documentation before them. Emily had spent months preparing their case, gathering evidence from veterinarians, behavioral experts, and other handlers. The room was packed with supporters, veterans, handlers, and advocates who had rallied around their cause. Representative Claire Anderson, who had championed their case, opened the proceedings with a powerful statement about the military's obligation to its four-legged veterans. She presented statistics showing increased PTSD rates among handlers forcibly separated from their dogs, alongside evidence of psychological trauma in the animals themselves. Dr. Morrison, the retired military veterinarian, provided expert testimony about Rex's medical history. His presentation was clinical but devastating, detailed analysis of how proper protocols had been ignored, leading to preventable physical and psychological trauma. The photos of Rex's untreated injuries drew audible gasps from the audience. When Jack took the stand, his voice steady despite his nerves, he shared their story. He spoke of their missions together, of lives saved and bonds forged under fire. Then came the painful part, the arbitrary separation, the years of searching, the trauma they both endured. His testimony painted a picture not just of personal loss, but of institutional failure. "Rex wasn't just my partner," Jack stated, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "He was a soldier who served his country with distinction, the same country that threw him away like broken equipment." The truth in his words hung heavy in the air. Sarah Thompson, the investigative journalist, presented her findings next. Her investigation had uncovered a pattern of similar cases, dozens of handler dog teams separated without proper evaluation or consideration for their well-being. The evidence suggested a systematic disregard for the psychological impact of these separations. The military's representatives attempted to defend their policies, citing operational necessity and resource allocation, but their arguments seemed hollow against the mountain of evidence and personal testimony. The sight of Rex, still carrying himself with military bearing despite his trauma, spoke louder than their bureaucratic justifications. Former handlers shared their own stories of separation and loss. Each testimony added weight to their case, building a compelling argument for policy change. The panel members' expressions began to shift from skepticism to concern as the pattern became undeniable. Emily's presentation was the culmination of months of research. She methodically outlined how current policies violated both military regulations and animal welfare standards. Her evidence showed how maintaining handler-dog bonds actually improved post-service outcomes for both parties. The most powerful moment came when Jack demonstrated Rex's current capabilities. On command, Rex performed a series of complex tasks, showing that his training remained intact despite his trauma. Then, responding to a series of hand signals, he seamlessly transitioned to his role as a support animal, displaying the versatility that made these bonds so valuable. The panel's questions revealed their growing understanding of the issue. They inquired about implementation costs, training modifications, and transition support. What had begun as a hearing about one handler dog team had evolved into a comprehensive review of the military's working dog program. The veterans in the audience shared knowing looks as the evidence mounted. Many had fought similar battles, trying to maintain connections with their canine partners. Jack and Rex's case was becoming a watershed moment, a chance to right a systemic wrong. Local media covered the hearing extensively, broadcasting key moments to a public already invested in their story. Social media buzzed with supportive messages, putting additional pressure on the military to acknowledge the need for change. As the hearing concluded, the head of the panel asked Jack one final question: "What do you want to come from this, Sergeant Reynolds?" Jack stood, Rex alert at his side. "I want recognition that these bonds matter, that they're not liabilities but assets, and I want a system that honors the service of all its veterans, two-legged and four-legged alike." The room fell silent as the panel withdrew to deliberate. Jack knelt beside Rex, scratching behind his ears, a gesture that would have been impossible months ago. They had done everything they could. Now they had to wait. Emily gathered their supporters, thanking them for their presence and testimony. The community they had built around their cause stood firm, ready to continue the fight regardless of the outcome. The hearing had already achieved something significant. It had given voice to a long-ignored issue. Whatever the panel decided, Jack knew they had succeeded in bringing attention to the plight of separated handler dog teams. Rex's story had become a rallying point for change, a symbol of both institutional failure and the possibility of redemption. As they waited for the decision, Jack reflected on their journey from the darkness of separation to this moment of potential transformation. Rex pressed against his leg, offering the same steady support he had provided in countless combat situations. They were in this fight together, just as they had always been. The hearing's second day was interrupted by an unexpected crisis. During the morning break, Jack was walking Rex in the building's courtyard when the sound of construction equipment backfiring triggered one of his most severe PTSD episodes. The sudden noise catapulted him back to their last mission together, to the explosion that had nearly taken both their lives. Jack collapsed against a wall, his breath coming in short gasps, his mind trapped in the memory of sand and gunfire. The crowd that gathered, though well-meaning, only intensified his panic. Security personnel approached rapidly, their hands moving toward their weapons, misreading the situation's volatility. In that crucial moment, Rex transformed. Gone was any trace of his own trauma as he seamlessly shifted into his old protective role. He positioned himself between Jack and the approaching security officers, not aggressively, but with clear purpose. His posture communicated both warning and control, a perfect demonstration of his military training. What happened next became the most compelling testimony they could have hoped for. Rex began executing his crisis response protocol, the same one they had practiced countless times in combat. He created a protective perimeter around Jack while simultaneously performing the grounding techniques they had used during combat stress situations. Emily, who had followed them outside, captured everything on video. Rex's actions were deliberate and precise, nudging Jack's hands to break his grip on his knees, offering physical contact as an anchor to reality, maintaining a guard position that protected while not constraining. It was a flawless demonstration of why these partnerships were so vital. The gathering crowd witnessed something remarkable: the synthesis of military training and deep emotional connection. Rex alternated between scanning for threats and attending to Jack, showing how handler dog teams could adapt their combat skills to civilian crisis management. His movements were so precise that several military observers present began taking notes. Dr. Morrison, who had stepped outside, provided professional commentary as the scene unfolded. He explained to the gathering panel members how Rex's responses demonstrated both retained training and evolved adaptation. The dog wasn't just remembering commands, he was actively problem-solving, combining his military experience with an understanding of Jack's specific needs. As Jack gradually emerged from his episode, Rex's behavior shifted again. The vigilant guard dog softened into a supportive companion, maintaining physical contact while guiding Jack through the grounding techniques they had learned in therapy. Their synchronization was seamless, a testament to both their original training and their renewed bond. The security officers, initially tense, relaxed as they recognized the controlled nature of Rex's response. Several of them were veterans themselves, and they understood what they were witnessing. One later testified about how Rex's behavior exemplified the ideal balance of protective instinct and disciplined restraint. Representative Anderson, who had stepped out to check on them, seized the moment to make a crucial point. This, she declared to the assembled panel members, was the living proof of why these bonds needed to be protected. No amount of standard training could replicate the intuitive understanding developed between a handler and their dog. The incident shifted the hearing's entire tone. What had been a discussion of policies and procedures became a real-world demonstration of the unique capabilities of handler dog teams. The panel members couldn't ignore the evidence of their own eyes, how supposedly compromised. Military Dog had executed a perfect crisis response while adapting to civilian circumstances. As Jack recovered, Still leaning against Rex for support, he became aware of the profound silence that had fallen over the courtyard. The dog's performance had rendered any further argument about their partnership's value redundant. Rex had just demonstrated exactly why the military separation policy needed to change. Emily's video of the incident, shared with permission, quickly went viral. Commentary from military dog trainers and PTSD specialists highlighted the sophisticated nature of Rex's response, how he had combined his military training with an emotional intelligence that couldn't be taught in any standard program. The crowd slowly dispersed, but the impact of what they had witnessed remained. Several panel members were seen in intense discussion, gesturing toward Jack and Rex. The dog's decisive action had transformed an unfortunate incident into a powerful demonstration of why these bonds were worth preserving. Back in the hearing room, the atmosphere had changed. Technical arguments about policy gave way to practical discussions about how to better support handler dog teams in their transition to civilian life. Rex's response had provided a compelling argument for maintaining these partnerships post-service. Jack, recovered but exhausted, found himself fielding questions about their crisis response training. He explained how they had adapted their combat protocols to manage his PTSD symptoms, highlighting the unique value of having a partner who understood both the source of his trauma and the most effective responses. The incident became known as the Courtyard Demonstration, a turning point in their campaign for policy change. Rex had proven that the deep understanding between handler and dog wasn't a liability but an asset, one that could literally save lives in both military and civilian contexts. As the day's session concluded, Emily noticed the panel members watching Rex with new eyes. The dog had single-handedly transformed their case from a matter of policy to a demonstration of untapped potential. In responding to Jack's crisis, Rex had shown exactly why these partnerships deserved to be protected and preserved. Just as momentum seemed to be building in their favor, powerful opposition emerged from unexpected quarters. A senior military administrator, Colonel Robert Blackwood, launched a counter-campaign questioning the validity of their evidence and the practicality of changing existing policies. Blackwood's first attack came through official channels, challenging the authenticity of Rex's service records and suggesting that Jack's PTSD might be clouding his judgment. He presented alternative reports painting Rex's retirement as necessary and proper, citing operational concerns, but that had supposedly justified the separation. The media narrative began to shift as Blackwood's office fed selected information to sympathetic journalists. Stories appeared questioning the cost implications of maintaining handler-dog partnerships post-service. Headlines asked whether emotional attachments were compromising military effectiveness. Anonymous sources suggested that Jack and Rex's case was being manipulated for political gain. Emily discovered that Blackwood had a personal stake in maintaining the status quo. His department oversaw the contracts for private facilities that handled retired military dogs, the same facilities that had failed Rex so badly. Any policy change would threaten these lucrative arrangements and expose years of mismanagement. The pressure intensified as Blackwood's allies began targeting their supporters. The veterinary clinic offering free services to retired military dogs suddenly faced surprise inspections. The training facility that had helped Rex received anonymous complaints about noise violations. Even Sarah Thompson, the investigative journalist, found her previous work being scrutinized for inconsistencies. Jack faced his own challenges as his service record came under hostile review. Questions were raised about his final mission with Rex, implying that their separation had been due to his mistakes rather than policy. The attacks were carefully crafted to seem legitimate while undermining their credibility. Some veterans organizations dependent on military funding began distancing themselves from the cause. Blackwood's office made it clear that support for Jack and Rex's case could jeopardize future partnerships. The community they had built started showing cracks under the pressure. The opposition's most effective tactic was bureaucratic delay. Every submission required multiple reviews, Each piece of evidence needed additional verification, and every hearing faced scheduling conflicts. The process designed to help them became a weapon used against them. Local officials, initially supportive, began hedging their positions as pressure mounted from above. The congresswoman who had championed their cause found her other military-related projects facing unexpected obstacles. The message was clear: this challenge to the system would not go unanswered. Dr. Morrison's professional reputation came under attack through a whisper campaign suggesting his assessments were compromised by personal bias. Other experts who had supported them faced similar subtle intimidation, leading some to withdraw their testimony. The toll on Jack became evident as the opposition mounted. The stress of defending not just their case but his entire service history triggered more frequent PTSD episodes. Rex, sensing his handler's distress, became more protective, which Blackwood supporters used to question his stability. Emily worked tirelessly to counter each attack, but the opposition seemed to have unlimited resources and influence. For every piece of evidence they presented, Blackwood's team produced contradicting documentation. For every supporter who spoke up, another was pressured into silence. Their legal team warned them about the reality they faced. They weren't just challenging a policy, but an entrenched system with deep financial and political roots. The opposition would use every tool at their disposal to maintain the status quo, regardless of the cost to veterans like Jack and dogs like Rex. The stress began affecting Rex's recovery as well. The constant scrutiny and hostile presence of unfamiliar officials during evaluations triggered his defensive behaviors. Blackwood's team seized on these reactions as proof that military dogs were too unstable for civilian life. As their support base eroded under the sustained pressure, Jack, Emily, and their remaining allies faced a harsh reality. They had naively believed that truth and justice would be enough to change the system. Now they understood that their fight wasn't just against poor policy, it was against powerful interests determined to maintain control over the fate of military working dogs. But the opposition had made one crucial mistake. In their eagerness to discredit Jack and Rex, they had created a paper trail of their own misconduct. Emily, quietly gathering evidence of their intimidation tactics, realized they had unknowingly provided the ammunition needed for the next phase of the battle. The mounting opposition took a heavy personal toll on both Jack and Rex. Late one night, after another day of defending their story against increasingly hostile scrutiny, Jack found himself sitting in his backyard, overwhelmed by doubt and guilt. Rex, sensing his handler's distress, maintained his vigilant position nearby, but even he showed signs of strain. Emily discovered her brother in this state, staring at his service medals with tears in his eyes. "Maybe they're right," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Maybe I'm just seeing what I want to see. What if I'm making things worse for him?" The weight of fighting not just for themselves but for all handler dog teams had begun to feel crushing. Rex's progress, so promising in the preceding months, showed signs of regression. The constant presence of unfamiliar officials during evaluations and the tense atmosphere of legal proceedings triggered his defensive behaviors. He began performing his security checks with increasing anxiety, sometimes pacing for hours through the night. Their home, once a sanctuary for healing, now felt like a fortress under siege. Each mail delivery brought more legal documents demanding responses. Each phone call carried potential for new challenges to their credibility. Jack's PTSD symptoms intensified under the strain, leading to sleepless nights filled with memories of combat and separation. The stress manifested physically for both of them. Jack lost weight, the dark circles under his eyes growing more pronounced. Rex's coat lost its shine, and his old battle scars seemed more visible than ever. Dr. Morrison, during a confidential checkup, noted signs of stress-induced regression in both handler and dog. Emily watched helplessly as her brother struggled to maintain his composure during public appearances. Each time Blackwood's team presented another challenge to their story, she could see Jack fighting back flashbacks, his hand instinctively reaching for Rex's reassuring presence. The bond that had helped them heal was now being used to question their stability. Their supporters noticed the change too. During support group meetings, other handlers saw how Jack's usual confident guidance of Rex had become tentative, haunted by the opposition's suggestions that their connection was unhealthy. The dog, picking up on his handler's uncertainty, became more protective but also more anxious. The hardest moments came during the mandatory psychological evaluations demanded by Blackwood's team. Jack had to repeatedly relive their separation while defending his mental fitness to advocate for their cause. Rex, separated from Jack during these sessions, would howl in distress, providing ammunition for those questioning their dependency. Sarah Thompson, visiting to update their story, found Jack struggling to articulate the simple truth of their relationship. The opposition's constant questioning had planted seeds of doubt that threatened to undermine the certainty he'd felt when first reuniting with Rex. "They're making me question everything," he confessed to her. Even their small victories felt tainted. When Rex successfully completed a public demonstration of his service skills, Blackwood's team suggested it proved he was still militarized and potentially dangerous. Jack's pride in his partner's abilities became tangled with fear that each success could be turned against them. Emily documented these struggles privately, seeing how the opposition's tactics were creating exactly the instability they claimed to be concerned about. The systematic attacks on their credibility were designed to break them, to force them to abandon their fight by making it too painful to continue. The community they'd built began showing signs of strain. Other handlers, seeing Jack's struggles, became hesitant to share their own stories. The fear of similar retaliation cast a shadow over their support meetings. Some stopped attending altogether, afraid that association with their cause could jeopardize their own veterans' benefits. In their darkest moments, alone in their backyard sanctuary, Jack would find himself apologizing to Rex. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you then," he'd whisper, "and I'm sorry I'm struggling to protect you now." Rex's response was always the same, a gentle press against Jack's leg, a reminder that whatever doubts plagued his handler, his own loyalty remained unshaken. Through it all, Emily kept fighting, though she carried her own burden of guilt for having initiated this battle. She watched her brother and Rex wrestling with their demons, publicly and privately, and questioned whether exposing them to this additional trauma had been the right choice. Yet giving up now would mean confirming every doubt their opposition had raised about them. The personal cost of their fight was mounting, threatening to undo all the healing they had achieved. But underneath their struggles, a deeper truth remained. Every attempt to break their bond only proved how essential it was, not just to them, but to all who served alongside faithful companions in war and peace. The turning point came from an unexpected source. A junior administrator in Blackwood's office, troubled by what she'd witnessed, reached out to Emily with a thumb drive containing years of internal communications. The documents revealed a conspiracy far deeper than they'd imagined, one that reached into the highest levels of military contracting. Sarah Thompson worked through the night with Emily, piecing together the evidence. They uncovered a network of private facilities, all connected to Blackwood's close associates, profiting from the rapid turnover of retired military dogs. The forced separations weren't just policy, they were part of a lucrative scheme that treated these highly trained animals as commodities. The documents revealed how Rex's separation from Jack had been orchestrated. His behavioral issues had been fabricated to justify his removal, while reports of their successful missions were buried. Similar patterns emerged in dozens of other cases. Decorated dogs suddenly deemed unstable when their handlers questioned the retirement process. Further investigation revealed that Blackwood had personally intervened to prevent handlers from tracking their dogs through the system. The facilities under his oversight routinely falsified records, moving dogs quickly to prevent reunions. The pattern of abuse Rex had suffered wasn't an accident, it was a deliberate strategy to make the dogs appear unsuitable for civilian adoption. Emily discovered financial records showing millions in kickbacks from private contractors who rehabilitated these dogs, often using harsh methods that destroyed their training and trust. The same companies would then declare the dogs unadoptable, creating a cycle that justified their continued contracts. The most damning evidence came in the form of emails discussing Jack and Rex's case. Blackwood and his associates had specifically targeted them, seeing their reunion as a threat to their operation. Every attack on their credibility had been coordinated, every delay calculated to break their resolve. Representative Anderson, presented with the evidence, immediately called for a formal investigation. The documents showed that dozens of decorated war dogs had been channeled through this corrupt system, their service records altered to justify their treatment. The scandal threatened to expose years of systemic abuse. As news of the conspiracy spread, other whistleblowers came forward. Former employees of the contracted facilities shared stories of deliberately harsh treatment designed to make the dogs appear dangerous. Veterinarians admitted to being pressured to exaggerate behavioral issues in their reports. The investigation revealed that Blackwood's network had actively worked to prevent successful civilian adoptions. Dogs who showed signs of maintaining their military training were subjected to harsh retraining. Methods, deliberately breaking their spirit to justify their continued detention in the system. Emily worked with legal experts to document how the conspiracy had specifically targeted Rex. They found evidence of direct orders to separate him from Jack, falsified behavioral reports, and deliberate mishandling designed to exacerbate his trauma. The paper trail revealed a calculated effort to destroy one of the military's most successful handler dog teams. The revelation that hit Jack hardest was learning how close he had come to finding Rex several times during their separation. Blackwood's office had repeatedly intervened, moving Rex just before Jack could trace him. Each transfer had been designed to make reunification impossible while generating more fees for the contracted facilities. As the evidence mounted, support for their cause surged. Military officials, previously hesitant to get involved, now demanded accountability. The sight of decorated war dogs being treated as pawns in a profit scheme outraged both the military community and the public. The thumb drive also contained personnel files showing how Blackwood's office had systematically intimidated other handlers who tried to locate their partners. Threats of career damage, benefit cuts, and public humiliation had been used to maintain silence about the program's true nature. For Jack and Rex, the revelations brought both vindication and fresh pain. Every document confirmed what they had known in their hearts: their separation had never been about policy or safety, but about profit and control. The trauma they had endured had been deliberately inflicted to serve others' greed. As the conspiracy unraveled, Emily carefully documented everything, building a case not just for policy change but for criminal prosecution. The evidence showed that what had happened to Jack and Rex wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a systemic abuse of those who had served their country with the highest distinction. Their personal struggle had uncovered a scandal that would reshape how the military handled its four-legged veterans, ensuring that no other handler dog team would suffer the same deliberate separation and abuse that had nearly destroyed their unbreakable bond. The morning of the final hearing dawned with an atmosphere of electric anticipation. The Military Review Board's chamber was packed beyond capacity, with overflow crowds watching on monitors in adjacent rooms. As Jack entered with Rex by his side, the assembly rose in a spontaneous show of respect. Representative Anderson opened the proceedings by presenting the full scope of evidence against Blackwood and his network. The documentation was irrefutable: years of systematic abuse, falsified records, and deliberate separation of handler dog teams for profit. Each revelation drew gasps and murmurs from the assembled crowd. As the evidence mounted, senior military officials made an unprecedented announcement. They would not only acknowledge the wrongdoing but take immediate action to rectify it. Blackwood and his associates were suspended pending criminal investigation, and all contracts with their affiliated facilities were immediately terminated. The military's highest-ranking veterinary officer stood to deliver a formal apology. He acknowledged the profound mistake in treating military working dogs as equipment rather than as soldiers, and announced new protocols requiring handler consultation in all retirement decisions. The policy that had separated Jack and Rex was officially declared void. In a powerful moment, Rex's original service record was restored, his commendations reinstated. The fabricated behavioral reports were publicly withdrawn, replaced with his true history of heroic service. Jack watched with tears in his eyes as his partner's reputation was finally cleared. The review board went further, establishing new guidelines for retiring military working dogs. Handler dog teams would now be kept together whenever possible, with support systems in place for their transition to civilian life. The bond between handler and dog was officially recognized as a valuable asset rather than a liability. Media coverage of the vindication was extensive. Sarah Thompson's comprehensive report detailed not just the conspiracy's exposure but the broader implications for military working dog programs worldwide. The story sparked international discussions about the treatment of service animals and their handlers. Veterans organizations, now free from intimidation, stepped forward with full support. They established programs to assist handler dog teams in their transition to civilian life, ensuring that future partnerships would receive the respect and care they deserved. The community that had begun to fracture under pressure reunited stronger than ever. Dr. Morrison's professional reputation was not only restored but enhanced. His understanding of the unique bond between handlers and their dogs became the foundation for new treatment protocols. The military adopted his recommendations for supporting both the physical and psychological health of working dog teams. Local officials who had wavered under pressure now rushed to show their support. The training facility that had helped Rex received official recognition for its work with veteran dogs. The veterinary clinic's free services program became a model for similar initiatives nationwide. Emily's documentation of their struggle became required reading for military dog program administrators. Her detailed account of the conspiracy's methods helped identify and prevent similar schemes from taking root elsewhere. Her work ensured that future handler dog teams would be protected from systematic abuse. The vindication extended beyond Jack and Rex. Other handlers who had lost track of their partners were given resources and support to reunite with their dogs. The military established a dedicated office to facilitate these reunions, acknowledging that healing these broken bonds was part of their obligation to veterans. During the final session, Jack was invited to speak. Standing with Rex at attention by his side, he addressed not just the review board but all handler dog teams who had suffered similar separations. "Today isn't just about clearing our names," he said. "It's about recognizing that the bonds forged in service don't end when the uniform comes off." As the hearing concluded, the head of the review board made a final declaration. Rex's case would become a precedent, ensuring that no other military working dog would be separated from their handler without just cause and due process. And the policy changes they had fought for were now permanently encoded in military regulation. Outside the chamber, Jack knelt beside Rex, overwhelmed by the magnitude of their victory. The German Shepherd, sensing the shift in his handler's emotions, pressed close in a gesture of comfort that needed no words. Their personal vindication had become a catalyst for systemic change, ensuring that future handler dog teams would never face the same betrayal they had endured. As they walked out together, the crowd parted respectfully. Their story had transformed from a personal struggle for justice into a landmark case that would protect generations of military working dogs and their handlers, ensuring that the bonds forged in service would be honored in peace. 6 months after their vindication, Emily's vision became reality. The Reynolds Military Working Dog Recovery Center opened its doors in a renovated ranch property outside Phoenix. The sprawling facility, funded by a combination of private donations and government grants, was designed specifically for handler dog teams recovering from service-related trauma. Jack and Rex became the center's first success story and its heart. The German Shepherd, now fully recovered from his own trauma, worked alongside Jack to help other dogs transition from military service to civilian life. Their unique understanding of both combat stress and separation anxiety made them invaluable in helping other teams heal. The center's design reflected everything they had learned through their own journey. Spacious training areas allowed dogs to maintain their skills while learning to adapt them to civilian contexts. Quiet spaces provided safe havens for handlers and dogs dealing with PTSD. The medical facility, staffed by veterinarians trained in military dog care, ensured that no service-related injury would go untreated. Emily's research formed the foundation of their approach. Each handler dog team received individualized support, recognizing that every partnership had its own unique challenges. The program combined traditional therapy with specialized training, allowing dogs to maintain their sense of purpose while adapting to civilian life. Dr. Morrison joined the staff as Chief Medical Advisor, implementing comprehensive health protocols for both handlers and dogs. His understanding of the psychological bond between warriors became central to the center's healing philosophy. Under his guidance, they developed new treatments for combat-related trauma that acknowledged the therapeutic value of the handler-dog relationship. The facility quickly became a model for similar centers across the country. Military officials, once skeptical, now regularly visited to study their methods. The success rates spoke for themselves. Handler dog teams who completed their program showed significant improvements in both physical and psychological health. Sarah Thompson documented the center's first year in a series of powerful articles. She captured the transformative moments handlers and dogs rediscovering their confidence together, training sessions that became breakthrough moments in PTSD recovery, quiet victories as trust was rebuilt one day at a time. Rex's role evolved beyond anyone's expectations. His intuitive understanding of other military dogs made him an unofficial mentor, helping newly arrived canines adjust to the center's routines. Handlers often remarked how he seemed to know exactly what their dogs needed, whether it was space, encouragement, or a reminder of their training. The center's impact extended beyond its immediate community. It became a research facility for studying the long-term effects of military service on working dogs and their handlers. Their findings helped shape new policies for military dog programs worldwide, ensuring better support for future handler dog teams. Jack found unexpected healing in his role as lead trainer. Helping other handlers work through their struggles gave purpose to his own painful experiences. His methods, developed through years of working with Rex, became standard practice for rehabilitating traumatized military dogs. Local schools began bringing students to learn about service animals and veteran support. Rex, once deemed too dangerous for civilian life, now helped children understand the importance of treating all veterans human and canine with respect and understanding. His gentle interactions with visitors became powerful testimony to the success of their program. The facility's success attracted attention from international military dog programs. Handlers and trainers from allied nations came to study their methods, creating a global network of support for service animals and their handlers. What had begun as one team's struggle for justice was now changing lives worldwide. Emily's office walls filled with photos of successful graduations, handlers, and dogs, leaving the center ready to face civilian life together. Each image represented a partnership saved, a bond restored, a future reclaimed from trauma and separation. The center had become everything she had hoped for and more. As spring turned to summer, Jack watched new teams arrive, each carrying their own wounds and fears. He remembered his own desperate search for Rex, the pain of separation, the struggle to rebuild trust. Now, standing in the center's training yard with Rex by his side, he could offer what he had once so desperately needed: hope, understanding, and a path to healing. The center's motto, displayed prominently at its entrance, summed up their mission: no bond broken, no warrior forgotten. It was more than just words, it was a promise to every handler dog team that crossed their threshold, a guarantee that they would find here what Jack and Rex had fought so hard to reclaim: a chance to heal together. On a crisp autumn morning, 1 year after the center's opening, Jack and Rex stood together watching the sunrise from their favorite spot on the property. The German Shepherd, grey now touching his muzzle, maintained his alert posture, but with a newfound serenity that spoke of healing completed. Their story had sparked a movement that transformed military working dog programs nationwide. The policies they helped change had already reunited dozens of handler dog teams, each reunion a testament to the battle they had fought and won. Their legal victory had become a cornerstone of military animal welfare reform. The center's success exceeded all expectations. Over 100 handler dog teams had completed their program, each carrying their own story of recovery and renewal. The sight of warriors healing together, human and canine, had become a daily miracle that never failed to move visitors to tears. Jack's nightmares had finally subsided, replaced by dreams of future possibilities. Rex still performed his security checks, but now they were calm routines rather than anxious compulsions. Together, they had found a new mission, ensuring that no other partnership would suffer the separation they had endured. Emily's advocacy work continued, but with a different focus. Instead of fighting against injustice, she now worked to expand support for veteran handler dog teams. Her research became the foundation for new military policies that recognized and protected the unique bond between handlers and their partners. Representative Anderson used their story to pass comprehensive legislation protecting military working dogs. The Rex Act guaranteed that no handler dog team would be separated without proper cause and ensured lifetime medical care for retired service dogs. Their personal victory had become lasting legal protection for all who would follow. The military's approach to working dog programs underwent a complete transformation. Training now emphasized the importance of the handler-dog bond, and retirement planning included support for both partners' transition to civilian life. The system that had once torn them apart now worked to keep teams together. Rex's legacy extended beyond policy changes. His journey from dangerous military dog to therapy animal ambassador inspired a new understanding of canine PTSD. Veterinarians nationwide adopted protocols developed through studying his recovery, helping countless other service dogs heal from combat trauma. The center became a place of pilgrimage for handlers searching for their lost partners. Jack and Rex worked with each case personally, their own story offering hope to those still searching. Every reunion they facilitated felt like another piece of their own healing falling into place. Their weekly support group grew into a nationwide network of handler dog teams. Through video calls and social media, they connected warriors across the country, ensuring that no partnership would face the challenges of civilian transition alone. The community they had built became a lifeline for new veterans. Sarah Thompson's final article about their journey won a Pulitzer Prize, bringing national attention to the importance of maintaining military working dog partnerships. Her sensitive portrayal of their bond helped change public perception of what these teams could achieve together. The training methods Jack developed with Rex became standard procedure for rehabilitating traumatized military dogs. Their approach, focusing on rebuilding trust through shared purpose, proved successful with even the most severely affected animals. Their pain had become a gift for others facing similar struggles. As they stood watching that sunrise, Jack reflected on their journey. The system that had tried to break them had instead made them pioneers in a movement that was changing lives. Their fight for justice had evolved into a mission of healing that touched teams across the nation. Rex pressed against Jack's leg, his familiar gesture of support now carrying years of shared understanding. They had moved beyond survival to purpose, beyond healing to helping others. Their bond, tested by separation and strengthened through adversity, had become a beacon of hope for others. The center itself stood as a monument to resilience, not just theirs, but every handler dog team that found their way back to each other. Each success story added another chapter to the legacy they had built, proving that no bond forged in service could truly be broken. In the end, their story wasn't just about a handler and his dog finding their way back to each other. It was about the power of unwavering loyalty, the strength found in fighting for what's right, and the healing that comes from turning personal pain into purpose. Jack and Rex had not only reclaimed their bond, they had transformed it into a force for change that would impact generations to come. If this story of unwavering loyalty and healing touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear about your own experiences with special bonds and resilience. Support our team by subscribing to see more inspiring stories like this one. Every like and share helps us reach others who might need to hear these messages of hope and redemption. Spread the power of these stories by sharing with friends and family. Together, we can celebrate the extraordinary connections that remind us what truly matters in life.